Good evening. The issue of black money has been consuming India over the last few years. Now the Prime Minister is promising to raise that issue at the world's premier talking shop, the G20. Will it help, or is it simply just another attempt to play to the galleries? Welcome to the news tonight. I'm Saka Jacob. As always, the headlines first. At the G20 summit this weekend, Prime Minister Modi is likely to seek the support of the international community in recovering black money. Softening prices of fuel and food items cool wholesale price inflation to a 5-year low, and this means more pressure on the RBI to cut interest rates. Rich tributes are paid to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on his 125th birth anniversary. The government kickstarts a year-long celebration even as the Congress and the BJP spar over his legacy. Suspended Trinamool Congress MP and Sharda scam accused Kunal Ghosh is stable after he reportedly tried to commit suicide inside jail. And the Supreme Court revealed some of the key protagonists in the IPL match-fixing case. It holds back the names of 3 current players after first disclosing them. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Brisbane, Australia to attend the G20 summit starting tomorrow. He will be pushing for a global consensus against cross-border tax evasion. The only problem is very few other countries, not the US, not the UK, and these are countries within the G20, actually have a problem of untaxed money being illegally stashed away in foreign bank accounts. We will try and get that report in just a moment for you, but let's try and discuss this issue, whether there will be any resonance in the G20 community of nations for the issue of black money, which, remember, has been a campaign promise by the BJP government and has been an issue on which it has received a certain amount of flack and criticism in the first 150 days plus that it has been in power. Shrikant Kondapalli is a professor in Chinese Studies at the Center for East Asian Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's now joining us here on the news tonight. Just curious how this is going to work, Professor, because as I understand, many of these so-called tax havens, whether it's Liechtenstein, whether it's the Cayman Islands, they're not part of the G20. And many of the developed countries in the G20, whether it's the US or UK, don't have a problem of untaxed money going offshore. So how then does the Prime Minister expect this issue to find resonance or even achieve a consensus?
I think Prime Minister Modi will find allies in Russia and China who are important members in the G20. Russia and China also have similar problems back at home. For example, Russia, soon after the Soviet disintegration, it was estimated that $20 to $30 billion a year was stashed away from Russia post-Soviet Union. Likewise, in China today, you have the airport seizures in California and other places. Apart from the Mexicans, it is the Chinese who carry huge money bags with hard currency to invest in the real estate or in other sectors in United States or in North America as a whole. In other words, there has also been a huge drain of hard currency from China, Russia, and others. So I think Prime Minister Modi will find allies on this issue.
Okay, the other issue that we will be talking about at the G20, and it came just a couple of days ago, was this deal between India and the United States, which will facilitate the trade agreement, which has been held back for the last 10 months or so. India was seen as a stumbling block in that. We still don't have the details or the broad contours as to why the US finally gave in to our position. But how does that play out? And does that give common ground to the G20? Is now India suddenly the toast of the G20 because we've finally been able to bury the hatchet with the US?
I think apart from the nuclear issue, which was being resolved from 2005-06 as part of the 123 agreement, which had actually stifled the bilateral relations between US and India from 1970 to the 1971 test that India conducted at that point of time. From then on, the bilateral relations have been, skewed in nature. Likewise, today, in terms of the WTO, as various US leaders have publicly mentioned this as a stumbling block. The economic issues, especially the WTO-related aspects, have become a major stumbling block in the bilateral relations. In order to get out of this, the deal today promises that once the WTO deal is done, possibly you will see investments, technologies, and market flows, market economy strengthening in India.
I also want to get your quick comments on another issue which is going to be a talking point in the run-up to the big Paris conference on climate change that's going to happen next year. We've got the big deal between the two biggest polluters in the world, the United States and China. What does that mean for India? Does India now get isolated in the global comity of nations as perhaps the only large, developing, polluting nation? We had the flag of South-South solidarity with the Chinese on pollution, but not anymore.
Well, globally, the 26 billion tons of emissions are produced. And if you look at the profile, China produces 5.1 billion tons of emissions, carbon dioxide, while United States produce 5.6 billion tons. India produces every year about 1.1 billion tons of pollution. So there is actually no match between China and India. India is 1/5 almost of the Chinese pollution record. In other words, there is actually no truck possible between China and India. However, since this has become a major contentious issue between US and China, China had been more forthcoming to the US demands. Remember, Kyoto Protocol in 1997 had actually emphasized more on the developed countries rather than developing countries. China's argument is that it is a developing country, and so it has to bypass some of these provisions in the international climate change proposals. I think in that context, the Chinese have done this deal with the United States.
Now, of course, pollution has become a huge issue which concerns ordinary Chinese people in China over the last few years. Thanks very much. Srikant Kondapalli is Professor in Chinese Studies at the Center for East Asian Studies at JNU. Thanks indeed for joining us here on the news tonight. Now, we want to go back to that story about Prime Minister Modi in Brisbane to attend the G20 summit. And just before the meeting begins, his team has made it clear that one of the talking points, one of their emphasis is going to be on black money and how to form an international consensus about untaxed money, unaccounted money that goes offshore.
A day after ending the key impasse over a crucial WTO deal, India hopes to get the best out of the two-day G20 summit in Brisbane. Leaders from 19 countries and the European Union will discuss job creation, identifying tax cheats and strengthening the global economy. Prime Minister Modi is expected to raise concerns over growth without jobs at the summit, stressing that economic growth should create employment. He's also going to press for a consensus against international tax evasion. With an eye on the black money issue, the centre is looking for more global cooperation to get more information. He will also seek access to renewable and clean energy.
As regards the black money, the same thing is in a different manner if you have automatic exchange of information in terms of people having bank accounts across the globe. And this is automatic, not now. As of now, you have bilateral treaties with each different country.
On day one of his Australia tour, Prime Minister Modi met his British counterpart David Cameron. The two leaders discussed ways to strengthen bilateral ties between the two countries. Cameron also invited Modi to visit the United Kingdom soon.
Prime Minister Cameron invited Prime Minister to visit UK at an early date. He said that that the UK will ensure that he would be received very warmly. Prime Minister said that he already is getting large amount of requests from the Indian community in the UK and will try and make it at an early date sometime next year.
Modi also met the President of the European Council, Herman Van Rompuy, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Friday. He is also expected to meet French President François Hollande and German Chancellor Angela Merkel on the sidelines of the summit. With inputs from Akhilesh Suman, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, quite curious, but the Prime Minister was conspicuous in his absence as the country remembered the nation's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, on his 125th birth anniversary. The government announced a year-long schedule of events dedicated to Nehru. What stood out, though, at the various events was the deepening political divide over his legacy.
At a function to mark the 125th birth anniversary of the first Prime Minister of independent India, Congress leaders getting the BJP's response to their apprehensions about attempts being made to destroy his secular vision. Paying tributes to Pandit Nehru, Home Minister Rajnath Singh said people should not try to foster a sense of fear.
कभी भी पंडित जी के मन में अपने राजनीतिक विरोधियों के प्रति भी अस्थायी भाव नहीं रहा। भारत जैसा बड़ा देश बड़े मन के लोगों के द्वारा ही चलाया जा सकता। हम भले ही एक दूसरे के ऊपर विभिन्न राजनीतिक दलों में रहते हुए आरोप प्रत्यारोप क्यों न करें, लेकिन जहां राष्ट्र हित का सवाल है वहां सबको एकजुट होकर खड़े होने की आवश्यकता है।
The divide over Nehru was also in evidence at his memorial at Shantivan, while President Pranab Mukherjee, Vice President Hamid Ansari and top Congress leaders including Sonia Gandhi paid their tributes. No one representative from the NDA was present, even as the government launched a campaign to spread awareness on cleanliness among children.
ये कार्यक्रम जिसमें हम बच्चों को सिखाएं हाथ धोएं या नमस्कार करें, जैसे मैं हमेशा बोलती हूँ नमस्कार करो बजाय कि हाथ मिलाओ, या अगर जुकाम हो तो माँ बाप एक दिन आपको घर रख जाए ताकि आप किसी और को जुकाम ना दे, या रुमाल इस्तेमाल करना शुरू करें, या पेड़ भी लगाना। ये चीज़ें अब एक दिन का मामला नहीं है, ये आहिस्ते आहिस्ते से हर सरकार करेगी, हर स्टेट में फैलेगा। ये it's not a party program.
The Home Minister released a special coin. The government also launched a web portal devoted to the life and times of Nehru.
ऐसे युग पुरुष की पूरा वर्ष तक स्मरणोत्सव के रूप में मनाने का जो फैसला किया गया है, मैं कहता हूं इसके दूरगामी परिणाम होंगे। ये प्रेरणा होगी उन युवाओं के लिए, ये प्रेरणा होगी उन करोड़ों भारतवासियों के लिए।
And even as the Congress continues to be wary about Modi's appropriation of the legacy of freedom movement leaders, the Prime Minister himself used the occasion to interact with Australian high school students, taking selfies and wishing them on Children's Day. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Like I said, the Prime Minister was conspicuous by his absence. Meanwhile, other national stories that we're tracking on the news tonight: suspended Trinamool Congress MP Kunal Ghosh, who's a key accused in the Sharda chit fund scam, today tried to commit suicide inside his prison cell. He was later taken to hospital, where he's reportedly recovering. He allegedly took sleeping pills at his cell in the Presidency jail. He had earlier threatened to commit suicide when he was produced before a court Monday. The jail superintendent, the doctor, as well as guards who were on duty at the time have all been suspended. The Trinamool Congress government has ordered an inquiry into this incident, but the opposition saying there is foul play, and foul play by the administration.
The Chief Minister, she said that the inquiry proceedings will go on. Until that, primarily she took some steps.
He said that he will commit suicide. Now it was for the Bengal police and the administration to watch that something like this doesn't happen. And therefore, again a question is being raised that whether this was a suicide attempt or it is a politically motivated something which has been allowed.
What we condemn is the attempt to selectively suppress and distort as far as big leaders in West Bengal are concerned. That is the real public interest story.
Meanwhile, from the east to the west, the Bombay High Court today stayed the Maharashtra government's decision to grant reservations to Marathas as well as Muslims in state government jobs and in educational institutions. The former Congress NCP government had just before the polls announced a 16% quota for Marathas and a 5% quota for Muslims. Now, the ruling BJP says it's going to take this process forward. It's in fact going to appeal to the Supreme Court against this order.
Outrage over the Bombay High Court's order to shelve reservations for the Marathas and the Muslims in state public services. Political parties denounced the judgment while calling on the new government to protect interests of both communities.
नई सरकार आई है, वो इसमें हस्तक्षेप कर सकती थी या नहीं, इसका भी स्पष्टीकरण होना चाहिए। अगर राज्य सरकार का कुछ और मत है, तो वो जनता के सामने रखें और स्पष्ट करें।
मुख्यमंत्री जी ने कहा है कि मराठा आरक्षण लागू रहेगा, इसके लिए हम प्रयास करेंगे। मुस्लिम आरक्षण के बारे में चुप है, ये भूमिका उनकी दोहरी है जो कि सही नहीं है।
The Shiv Sena accused the BJP government of failing to uphold the Maratha pride. Under attack, the new chief minister said the government will approach the Supreme Court.
पण सरकार मराठा आरक्षणाच्या पूर्णपणे बाजूने आहे आणि हायकोर्टामध्ये मराठा आरक्षणाच्या संदर्भात जर काही निर्णय झाला असेल तर त्या निर्णयाला आम्ही सुप्रीम कोर्टामध्ये दाद मागू। कुठल्याही परिस्थितीमध्ये मराठा आरक्षण टिकेल।
The Bombay High Court, however, allowed quota for Muslims in educational institutions, citing abysmally low educational achievements. It also underlined the need to draw them into the mainstream of secular education. The court, however, excluded private educational bodies from the purview of reservations for the minority community. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, some economic news and continuing decline in food prices has pulled up wholesale price inflation down to a 5-year low. The WPI, based on inflation, was recorded at 1.77% for the month of October. It was a little over 2 3/10 in September. And in October of last year, it was 7.24. Food inflation is on decline since May this year. The sharp drop came after retail inflation also dropped to 5.5% for the month of October. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says the decline in global crude prices should further help the improving price situation. Here's more news from across the country in our special segment, Nationwide. India today test-fired the surface-to-surface nuclear-capable Prithvi-2 missile from the Chandipur test range. The indigenously developed missile has a strike range of 350 kilometers. It can carry up to 500, even 1,000 kilos of warheads. India's frontline combat aircraft, the Sukhoi 30, the entire fleet of which was grounded after a crash near Pune, will be back in the air within a week. This was the assurance from the Air Force Chief Arup Raha, who also said that the findings of a court of inquiry into the crash are now being finalized. In a stark U-turn, Delhi's power regulator, the DERC, withdrew the 7% power tariff hike that it announced yesterday. The DERC says the hike was rolled back after it realized that a number of power generation companies, including NTPC, had only provided a part of the information about fuel pricing and billing. 2 militants were killed in an encounter with security forces in the Kulgam district of South Kashmir late last night. The gun battle between militants and security forces lasted several hours. A huge cache of arms were recovered from the area where terrorists were reportedly hiding. Talking about terrorists, we're going to take a break here in the program. When we come back, just a couple of days after his reported death, the leader of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, resurfaces with an audio message, and it's an ominous one. He's calling for volcanoes of jihad. That and more international stories when the News Tonight returns. Welcome back. This is the News Tonight. Time now to focus on some international stories. Now, there were reports a couple of days ago saying that the Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was dead. Today, as if to contradict that theory, the Islamic State released an audio recording of their leader. In that audio, al-Baghdadi claims that the US-led military campaign against his group in Syria as well as in Iraq was failing. He's now calling for, quote, volcanoes of jihad the world over. The speech is purported to be in his name. It's posted onto the internet. Baghdadi has also called for attacks against the rulers of Saudi Arabia. This audio recording was carried on the Islamic State-run social media. The voice sounded pretty similar to a previous speech delivered by Baghdadi in July in Mosul. That's the last time he spoke in public.
ويا جنود الدولة الإسلامية امضوا في حصاد الأجناد فجروا براكين الجهاد في كل مكان وأشعلوا الأرض نارا على كل الطواغيت وجنودهم وأنصارهم.
From the leader of the Islamic State to the supposed leader of the free world, US President Barack Obama today said that he would take executive action unilaterally to reform America's broken immigration policy, and he's going to do it fast. He's going to fix it, reportedly, before the end of the year. The New York Times today reported Obama is planning to announce an overhaul of US immigration policy, even bypassing Congress, that would protect more than 10 million immigrants from deportation. It's taken 6 years and a pasting at the midterm elections. Now, President Barack Obama is cracking the whip on an issue that's close to his heart.
This is what he's been saying every time he's asked the question. Well, we can cut out...
And he's doing it alone. Immigration. Word is, Obama is set to unilaterally overhaul the American immigration system by recognizing almost 11 million people who are living illegally and making them full-fledged American citizens. Obama has held off taking action for 6 years, hoping that congressional Republicans would pass a comprehensive reform bill. That never happened. Now, the new ultimatum suggests that Obama could sign an executive order bypassing lawmakers as early as next week.
And I indicated to Speaker Boehner several months ago that if, in fact, Congress failed to act, I would use all the lawful authority that I possess to try to make the system work better. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen before the end of the year.
But the president will face stiff opposition from Republicans in Congress if he continues down this path. After all, his party just lost both chambers.
You know, the president's threatening to take unilateral action on immigration, even though in the past he's made clear he didn't believe he had the constitutional responsibility or authority to do that. And I'll just say this. We're going to fight the president tooth and nail if he continues down this path. This is the wrong way to govern. This is exactly what the American people said on Election Day they didn't want.
The proposed overhaul of the bill would stop deportations for millions. The initiative that could cause disquiet is a plan to expand deferred action for young people. This will protect young adults who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children. It will also include parents of children who are U.S. citizens or legal residents. But given the political deadlock in Washington, if Obama were to use his executive powers, the government could risk a shutdown yet again. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And President Obama, of course, has his hands full over the weekend as the G20 summit begins, which is being billed now as a showdown between Western leaders led by Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is on the back of fresh reports of Russian troops pouring into eastern Ukraine. British Prime Minister David Cameron has warned that Russia's actions could draw even more sanctions, both from the US as well as from the European Union. However, Russia has denied sending any troops or tanks into Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin berated the US for undermining the very trade institutions it created in the first place by imposing sanctions on Russia. Ahead of the summit, Putin said that sanctions imposed on Russia over Ukraine harmed not just that country, but the entire global economy.
If Russia takes a positive approach towards Ukraine's freedom and responsibility, we could see those sanctions removed. If Russia continues to make matters worse, we could see those sanctions increase. It's as simple as that.
В отношении России со стороны двадцатки вводят санкции. Конечно, это противоречит самому принципу и деятельности двадцатки, но и не только деятельности двадцатки и принципам работы двадцатки. Это противоречит международному праву, потому что санкции могут быть введены в рамках Организации Объединенных Наций.
There's really no love lost between Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama. Talking about Obama, just before he left for Australia for the G20 summit, he met with Myanmar's pro-democracy icon and opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. He reaffirmed the commitment that the United States has made to her cause. Speaking at a joint press conference with her in Yangon, Obama warned that the reform process in Myanmar was by no means complete or irreversible. He raised concerns over the direction of reforms, citing the mistreatment of minorities, particularly the Muslim Rohingyas, as well as the clampdown on press freedom. Suu Kyi cautioned against over-optimism about the reform process itself.
Discrimination against the Rohingya.
Our reform process is going through, let us say, a bumpy patch. But this bumpy patch is something that we can negotiate with commitment and with the help and understanding of our friends from all over the world. So let us not exaggerate the differences, the difficulties, but at the same time, let us not exaggerate the rosy picture either.
Much hard work remains to be done and that many difficult choices still lie ahead. The process for reform is by no means complete or irreversible.
She's so elegant, isn't she, Aung San Suu Kyi, even at this old age? Something that's not so elegant, the Supreme Court today disclosed 7 names linked to the IPL spot-fixing scam. The Justice Mudgal Committee probing that case has named some heavyweights: former BCCI President N. Srinivasan, his son-in-law Gurunath Mayappan, the former IPL COO Sundar Raman, and, get this, the Rajasthan Royals co-owner Raj Kundra. All 4 of them will be served notices to explain their standpoint. The next hearing is going to be on the 24th of November.
सुंदर रमन, श्रीनिवासन, मयप्पन और राज कुंद्रा, इन नामों पे एक एप्लीकेशन लगाने के लिए कोर्ट से आग्रह किए हैं श्री हरीश साल्वे साहब ने, जिसे कोर्ट ने मान लिया है। अभी 6 नाम होल्ड पे रखे गए हैं बड़े खिलाड़ियों का।
After months of investigation, names of those non-cricketers involved in one of the biggest sporting scams were revealed on Friday afternoon. Among the 7 names, the key names were those of former BCCI chief N. Srinivasan and his son-in-law Gurunath Mayappan. Srinivasan had to step down as the BCCI chief after the scam was unearthed. He was going to stand for re-election next week, but that has now been postponed to December. Mayappan was team principal of Chennai Super Kings till last year. Former IPL COO Sundar Raman and Rajasthan Royals co-owner Raj Kundra were also named in the report.
कोर्ट ने मुझे प्रोब, हमारी कमेटी को प्रोब के लिए अपॉइंट किया था। हमने अपनी रिपोर्ट दे दी है। सुप्रीम कोर्ट के माननीय उच्चतम न्यायालय के आदेशों का इंतजार कीजिए, उसमें आपको पूरा जब उनकी इच्छा होगी वो बता देंगे।
The court ordered non-disclosure of names of the players who have been indicted in the report, but inadvertently named 3 cricketers from the list of 13 names, thinking they were non-players. The court will take up the hearing again on 24th of November, when the accused will have to be physically present to defend their cases. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Well, why one set of rules for the players and another set for the officials? I'm sure we'll hear more on that in the days ahead. Right now, Sports Beat. After 4 games in the World Chess Championship, both Vishwanathan Anand and Magnus Carlsen are tied at 2.5 points each. Anand, who was playing white, settled for a draw in the 5th game. Both players have 7 more games to go. This is a 12-game championship. Australian fast bowler Mitchell Johnson was named both Cricketer of the Year as well as Test Cricketer of the Year. This is in the ICC rankings. Johnson is only the 2nd player after another Aussie, Ricky Ponting, to win the Sir Garfield Sobers Trophy twice. South Africa's A.B. de Villiers was named One Day Cricketer of the Year, while England's Gary Ballance is the Emerging Player of the Year. The International Boxing Association unanimously approved Boxing India as a permanent member today. The decision was taken during the Quadrennial Congress in South Korea. This is good news for the boxing body, as India was provisionally suspended in December of 2012 for possible manipulation. And on that note, it's a wrap of the News Tonight, this Friday edition. Thanks for your time if you'd been tuned in. From me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team, we'll see you again tomorrow night. Bye-bye.